my big push today, what my hopeful take-home for you is four things, right, that can help you improve your creativity. And these are things that, you know, we look at the university or in business research, psychological research probably more predominantly, as sources of creativity. One of my favorite articles in the Harvard Business Review 5 or 6 years ago by a professor at Harvard talked about the innovator's DNA. So in other words, what makes the leaders that we hear about, the Richard Bransons, the Michael Dells, the Steve Jobs, what makes them creative? And it identifies 5 things that are part of their DNA. And I'll talk about a few of them here. The first one, 4 things to work on. These are my distressed gingerbread men. The first one relates to a story, a personal story of mine, which is kind of a funny story. Again, those of you that know me have probably heard this story, but it relates to my decision to fall into academia. And true story, I was an accountant for Coopers & Lybrand before they merged with Price Waterhouse, and I hated it, right? So I thought, let's get out of that, right? Apologies to the accountants in the room. And I thought, what did I like? I really like school, and I'm sure many of you are like me. I like school because probably because there was no structure and you could just go to class and it was yay. So I thought, I'll just go back to school and just keep going to school, right? And so that was my plan, much to my parents' dismay. So I came out here to UBC and started working in the graduate program. And what was interesting about a PhD, right, is to be successful, you had to pick a good advisor, someone that was world famous, that would, you know, let you tie your wagon to them, and then away you would go, right? And so I was like, I'm going to do that. So I applied to this famous professor here at UBC, and they accepted me, and I flew out, and I landed, and I got here, went up to the campus, and they told me he's retired. And I'm like, crap, right? So I'm like, who's going to be my advisor? So I worked my butt off that summer trying to impress all of the other professors. One of them was famous for classical conditioning. So he liked to study, just like Pavlov's dog, how consumers, you know, when you go buy a Kentucky Fried Chicken and it just affects you, why, you know, this type of thing. So that's what he would study. I thought, oh, I could like study that kind of stuff, basic attitude theory, and that would be awesome, right? So I worked my butt off all summer. And I was thrilled in the fall when they called me up and they said, Darren, you know, we've been impressed with your work your first summer here, and we'd like to ask you to work on a project. And I'm like, yes, right? I'm like, I have an advisor again. This could be awesome. And I remember to this day on the 8th floor in the Henry Angus building, those of you that know UBC, going up to the office and going into the room, and I'm like, okay, what's it going to be? Is it like attitude theory? Maybe it's affect and emotion. What am I going to study, right? And they said, Darren, we're excited to have you here, and we've got a new grant from the federal government, and we're going to use it to sponsor this research, and we'd like you to be involved. And I'm like, awesome, what is it? I'm like, Darren, it's research on sex. And I'm like, yes. I'm like, I am willing to have as much sex as is required. This is something I can really work on. And they're like, no, Darren, you're confused. It's not like sex. It's research on condoms. And I'm like, condoms? I'm like, okay, a little weird, but I'm willing to try all of the condoms and report back on which is the best. And they're like, no, Darren, it's not, you're not going to use condoms. What we want you to do is we want you to watch people buy condoms. And I'm like, shut up. That's super creepy. And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, this is really weird. Yeah, but I'll go down to Shoppers Drug Mart and I'll watch someone buy a condom, and then I'll report back that they were successful, and that'll be great research, right? No, Darren, you're confused. What we'd like you to do, yes, we'd like you to go down to Shoppers, but we want you to pose as a stock boy in the aisle every Friday and Saturday night from 4 to 10 p.m. for the next 3 months and watch people buy condoms. And I was like, shut up. And they're like, no, this is the job. We would like you to watch people, truly observe the consumer behaviors. And of course, at that stage, you didn't really have a choice. So I went down to Shoppers on Davie Street, right, the busiest Shoppers in Canada. And I stood at the end of the aisle in the aftershave, and I'd do shelf facings, and I'd watch people come into the aisle. We called it the aisle of shame because they sell the tampons and the condoms and the lube and the douche, and it's a very awkward aisle. And so I'd watch people come in, and I would record everything. And what I mean by everything is I'd time how long they take. I'd see would they go up to the display, would they pull the condoms off, would they look at the price, would they read the package, would they put it in their basket, would they hide it under things, would they take it to the pharmacist to buy it, or would they go to the regular cashier, would they choose a man or would they choose a woman, would it look like their mom or dad, I'd have to guess, were they with somebody else. I would record everything, right? Why? The federal government, research exactly, had given us money to understand condom purchase because obviously AIDS and STDs through the 80s had become a very salient and big issue. And so they wanted to understand what are the barriers to condom purchase. And to truly understand what the barriers were, much like an anthropologist or ethnography, right? I was to get right there at ground zero and get a true understanding through observation of what individuals did. Now that research identified barriers. It eventually was published in the American Journal of Public Health. For me, that was exciting. I was also caught 3 shoplifters. I was offered a job as a stock boy as the PhD didn't work out. So for me, it was kind of a fun adventure, though very painful in some ways. But I learned a lot about observation. And the first thing to tell you about creativity, interestingly, is observation is linked to creativity.